Is there anyone here from Leicester? Wonderful. Isn't it great that Leicester has been chosen by Ed Miliband and the party to hold the first ever launch of a BAME manifesto. And I want to thank all of you for coming here this morning stroke afternoon, because we will go past 12 noon to be here for this historic occasion. I am so pleased to see people from all parts of Leicester. We've even allowed people in from Leicester South with their visas. And can I start by saying how pleased I am that the Mayor of Leicester, Peter Soulsby, is here, and my good friend Jonathan Ashworth. But this is important to all of us. Those of us in the diverse communities who've been in the party for many, many years have always felt that a political party should recognise the importance of the black, Asian and minority ethnic vote. And now we're not just treated as votes, we're treated as people who are first-class contributors to this party. We have councillors, we have members of parliament, we have members of the shadow cabinet, we have people who serve at all parts of the party's hierarchy. And I think that's good. It's good for Leicester and it's very good for Britain. And I am delighted that we have so many of our friends here today, because even though it's only 1 hour and 15 minutes on the train, and I suggest you use the train rather than the car, it is a long way to come, especially if you're a member of parliament who is fighting a parliamentary constituency. That's why I'm so pleased to see so many of my colleagues here today, and I'm going to introduce them all to you. I want to start with members of the shadow cabinet who will be serving in the next government, and I want to start with my dear friend Sadiq Khan. And we welcome you, Sadiq, in the traditional way of Leicester. You should expect this whenever you come through Leicester. Please rise and be garlanded. Sadiq Khan, everyone. Sadiq is our Shadow Lord Chancellor, Shadow Minister for London and Shadow Secretary of State for Constitutional Affairs, which means that after the next election, he will be the first Asian person ever to sit in the most important and oldest of jobs in the legal profession. He'll be the first Asian Lord Chancellor. We're very proud of all that you've done in opposition, Sadiq, over the last 5 years, and we know that you will make a brilliant Lord Chancellor. We also have from Birmingham, coming along the M69 within the legal speed limit of 70 miles an hour, is another colleague who has made a triumphant start to her front bench career when she was appointed as the Shadow Minister in the Treasury. So she knows all about tax. She knows all about tax avoidance and how to stop it, and she has been writing that crucial manifesto that is going to bring us jobs to the people of Leicester and to the people of this country. She's the Shadow Treasury Minister, Shabana Mahmood, and we will garland her in the usual way. We're also delighted to have here one of our newest members of parliament who's had a meteoric rise to the front bench. She was appointed by Ed Miliband and Yvette Cooper to serve in the Shadow Home Affairs team, and she has done a marvellous job protecting the rights of women. She's the Member of Parliament for Feltham and Heston. Please will you give a warm welcome to Siva Malhotra, who will be garlanded. I'm just worried that we are going to run out of garlands, simply because I know Ruxy is here today, so Belgrave Florists is closed for the morning because of Ed Miliband's appearance. But I think we probably got enough, because it would not be right for me not to recognise and acknowledge the presence in this hall today of a man elected with me in 1987 to Parliament. We can remember the scenes. He looked a lot younger then, but we both did. My dear friend Paul Boateng, now Lord Boateng of Brent. And finally, also from Birmingham, we can't give a garland to Jonathan Ashworth because he'll expect this every time he comes into Leicester East. But we do have one for Carlene Mahmood. I went to Birmingham to church with Carlene, funnily enough. Or what else would you do with Carlene? On Sunday. We went to the New Testament Gospel Church on Lozells, and they absolutely adore him in Lozells. Lozells Road is not yet as famous as the Belgrave Road, but it's getting there. And we then crossed the road to a new £3 million mosque that had been paid for by the community. Please give a warm welcome to Carlene Mahmood. No garland, I'm afraid, for our other shadow minister, because he's also a Leicester man, but he is also my good friend and Leicester supporter, and he knows that we need to win the last 5 matches of the season if we are going to stay in the Premiership. He's always there every Saturday. He is our Shadow Attorney General, Lord Willie Back. I'm now going to hand you over to a man who will be in the next cabinet of the United Kingdom. Please give a very warm welcome to Sadiq Khan.
Thank you, Keith, for that welcome. As I was coming up to the centre and saw all the posters and pictures and banners of Keith Vaz, it felt like going to a One Direction concert at the O2. I've never seen so many pictures of one person since I last went to. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here in Leicester East. And the reason why we're here is to launch the BAME Manifesto. And as Keith said, it's the first time we've launched such a manifesto. It's worth reminding ourselves the history the Labour Party has had with black, Asian, minority ethnic communities. That great Clement Attlee government of 1945, of course, created the welfare state. It was that Labour government that gave independence to Pakistan and India. And the first ship, Windrush, came to this country in 1948 during that first Labour government. And during the 1960s, when my dad came to this country from Pakistan, there were signs up in bed and breakfasts and in hotels. And what did the signs say? No blacks, no Irish, no dogs. The Conservatives would put out leaflets in Birmingham saying, if you want an N ... for a neighbour, vote Labour. And of course we know about Enoch Powell's famous Rivers of Blood speech. And it was a Labour government in 1968 that passed this country's first ever Race Discrimination Act to make it against the law for people to behave that way and treat people differently on the basis of their colour or their skin. And you know, during those 18 years of a Conservative government, there was a moment of light when in 1987 the Fab Four were elected to Parliament. I remember when I saw the scenes when Diane Abbott, Bernie Grant, Keith Vaz and Paul Bartang were elected. As a young boy, thinking, wow, in the mother of all parliaments, people who look like my family, who look like my friends and family can be elected. And I think we should begin by paying tribute to Paul Boateng and Keith Vaz for being pioneers in Parliament. Pioneers. Really. I never met these people until much later, but they had an impact on my life and the impact of my family and friends. They had an impact on people who they may never meet because we saw people who look like us who could be in Parliament. And you know which party those 4 MPs belong to? Which party? It was the Labour Party they belonged to. We should be proud of that. And you know, in the early 1990s, in 1993, we saw the murder of Stephen Lawrence in Eltham in southeast London. And it took a Labour government in 1997. Paul was a member of that government, as was Keith. A Labour government ordered a public inquiry into the death of Stephen Lawrence. It passed a Race Relations Amendment Act. It outlawed discrimination on the grounds of religion and belief. It increased aid, cancelled debt and improved trade with developing countries. And did so much in relation to relations between government, the police and public authorities and the public. And then we lost the general election in 2010. And with anti-discrimination, with promoting equality, we know if you take your foot off the pedal, things go backwards. And what have we seen over the last 5 years? Fantastic news. Unemployment has gone down for long-term unemployed amongst the mainstream community. But for African Caribbeans, long-term unemployment has risen by 50%. 50%. If you're a young black Caribbean, you're 3 times more likely to be excluded from school. Stop and search, 7 times more likely if you're African Caribbean. Of 108 High Court judges, 1 is black, Asian, minority, ethnic. Of the 100 FTSE companies, 1 chief executive is black, Asian, minority, ethnic. 14% black, Asian, minority, ethnic country, only 5% of the police service are black, Asian, minority, ethnic. So it'll be left to a Labour government to rectify this. We saw this summer the huge rise in anti-Semitic crimes and Islamophobic crimes. Government silence, Labour action. So it'll fall to the next Labour government to try and address this balance. And the important starting point is this. We believe that as a country, all of us prosper when the potential of all of us is fulfilled. Now, Ed Miliband will be setting out later on the details of our black, Asian, minority, ethnic manifesto. But you're going to get a chance to listen to 3 or 4 of our Labour politicians standing on the shoulders of Paul Boateng and Keith Vaz. And it's my pleasure to introduce as the next speaker one of our sisters who was elected to Parliament in a by-election. You see, only the Labour Party selects Asian women candidates in by-elections and returns them to Parliament. She made history. She was the first Punjabi woman returned to Parliament. She's one of our sisters. She is a rising star. I want to show your warmth and your love to Seema Malhotra.
Thank you very much, Sadiq, for your introduction. And I also want to extend my welcome to you all today. And indeed, it is a pleasure to be in Leicester again. And I believe that my visa was valid to allow me in. And to be here with such a great range of people in the audience as well, representing so many different communities, so many faiths. And I think in that, just showing how coming together, showing what Britain is today is an incredibly important part of us standing truly proud on the world stage, of having a diverse community that won us the Olympics and actually says we believe in equality and we believe in showing that we believe in equality. And in the last 3 years since I've been elected, I've been incredibly proud to serve as one of Labour's 16 ethnic minority members of Parliament. I represent a constituency that's over 50% ethnic minority. It's a place where I grew up, and it's a place where I'm hearing constituents tell me every day how they're struggling to get a job and to make ends meet. And we know what is important, breaking down those barriers still facing people from ethnic minority backgrounds. We are a party that believes in equality. It's in our DNA. And we know that no society that believes in everyone having the chance to get on can tolerate the inequality that we know exists. And that's why I'm incredibly proud to be here today, to be helping launch Labour's BAME Manifesto, a cross-government race equality strategy to drive progress in every area of government. And we've come a long way since 1987, when Keith Vaz and Paul Boateng were part of the first 4 ethnic minority Labour MPs elected. And I can say that I'm still incredibly proud of what they did then and the legacy that they have left for us coming forward today. And it's still incredibly sad as well that we only have just over 4% of our House of Commons being ethnic minority. Indeed, if the BAME population was fully represented, we'd have 84 ethnic minority members of Parliament. And so our BAME manifesto starts from that basis, that Britain will only succeed when working people succeed. And we know that that simply is not the case. Over 750,000 young people are unemployed. 1 million people are now using food banks. That's up from 60,000 4 years ago. And for ethnic minorities, the situation is worse, as Sadiq outlined. Long-term unemployment for ethnic minority young people increasing by 50% in the last 5 years. If you're under 25 and you're black, you're twice as likely to be out of work. BME communities still overrepresented in minimum wage jobs and more likely to earn less than the living wage, with half of the Bangladeshi community earning below the living wage. But as well as economic difficulties, I've seen from my own constituency the difficulty that residents have accessing health services and other important support. And that's why our policies of raising the national minimum wage to £8, banning exploitative zero-hours contracts will help close the BME pay gap. That's why we need to ensure better and more inclusive public services with our Parliament, public services, police and the judiciary representative of communities that they serve. Building stronger communities, taking that action that Sadiq talked about against rising anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and making sure that we stand tall on the world stage, proud of our legacy and our tradition of human rights, standing up for tolerance, religious tolerance and justice. But we also know that as ethnic minorities remain grossly underrepresented in our Parliament, that it reduces that voice of ethnic minorities in our political debate. Labour has had an incredibly positive track record in increasing our representation in politics and public life, but so much more needs to be done. Over the 3 years before the 2010 election, Labour increased ethnic minority representation in the civil service by 11%. But since 2010, this progress has been all but wiped out, with the proportion of ethnic minority staff working at the most senior level falling. And even in London, which has a BME population of 40%, just 6% of those in top jobs are from minority communities. The pattern is replicated in so many other professions, as Sadiq also outlined. And indeed, just 5 out of 105 nursing directors are from BME backgrounds, less than 7% of the police across the country, less than 4% of firefighters. And on public boards, the Tories took away targets for new public appointments. The number of BMEs appointed to public boards dropped last year from 7.2% to 5.5%. So that's why we need to make sure that we're increasing the voice and the representation of ethnic minorities in our politics and in our debate. That's why we held events to encourage registration for the election, and why even yesterday I was in my constituency encouraging those who are not yet registered to do so in the final few days. And the inequalities that we know still exist, the stop and search, high unemployment, poor educational outcomes, the only way to really tackle these now is to do so by voting. And it's by being involved in politics that we can make sure that we achieve the change that we need. And I want to say this also, that we hear a lot of negativity in our political debate. But it's our minority communities that are also an economic asset to Britain. Because being in diaspora communities, we maintain links with home nations that are incredibly important for our trade. And for Britain to do well, we need all our communities to do well. So as well as the moral imperative to help everyone realise their potential, there's clearly an economic imperative for us to make that progress also. So if you want to see the cause of equality furthered, then you need to vote for a government for whom equality is an overriding priority. And you need not just to vote Labour this year, but to be involved and be part of that campaign, to convince your friends, your neighbours, those who are not interested in the election, to vote Labour too. It was Labour's 1968 Race Relations Act that made it illegal for the first time to refuse housing, employment or public services to people on the basis of ethnicity or background. We've seen how recently that is still very much needed. There was a recent expose on housing by the BBC where 10 housing agencies in West London were caught on film saying they would not rent to African Caribbean people. So we've had a huge and important record, but we believe there's so much more to do, and we believe that it's Labour that's got the courage and the heart to make that happen. And so I'd like now to close, but to also warmly introduce my colleague and friend, and our incredibly effective Shadow Treasury Minister, Shabana Mahmood, to address you.
Thank you very much, Seema, and thank you to all of you for that warm welcome. I'm going to start with what appears to be the tradition for this afternoon and pay tribute to our absolute hero MPs of 1987, Keith Vaz, Paul Boateng, but also Diane Abbott and Bernie Grant, who you all know is sadly no longer with us. You should all know that you are absolute heroes for us, not just in the Labour movement, but across the country, because they broke a barrier by being the first ethnic minority MPs ever to be elected to the House of Commons in 1987. And it is the breaking down of that barrier that enabled me in 2010 to join my friends and my sisters, Yasmin Qureshi and Rushnara Ali, as the first ever Muslim women to be elected to the House of Commons. And that would not have been... Thank you. That would not have been possible without Keith, without Paul, without Diane, and without Bernie as well. So thank you to the four of you. I just wanted to reflect on the fact that I should take the story back to my constituency. My constituency is 60% non-white. Birmingham Ladywood has a very, very diverse population. Sometimes when we talk about diversity in constituencies, what we are really saying is one particular ethnic minority group is large in number in any given constituency. But actually, in Ladywood, I have huge numbers of pretty much every ethnic minority group that there is. So not only is it diverse in terms of being non-white, but even amongst the non-white population, there's a huge amount of diversity, both from a race perspective, but also from a religious diversity perspective as well. And often when I talk to colleagues and others about sort of constituency issues that come up for me on a regular basis, people I think assume that I must be mired in just community politics, i.e. community-specific issues that worry individual community groups. But actually, the reverse is true, because the number one issue that I have in my constituency, and which every different community in my constituency is always talking to me about and is always worried about and is always number one on their list of priorities, is jobs. Because Ladywood has one of the highest rates of unemployment in the country, and the fact that it has such a large BME population is not disconnected from the high unemployment statistics. So actually, the one thing that unites us all is something that speaks to a greater truth in our country, and that is about the economy, and the fact that in the last 5 years, we've had an economy that has not been working for working people. And it is certainly the case that if it's not been working for the overall population, it's certainly not been working for the BME population either. And you'll have heard in Seema's remarks, she said that long-term unemployment for young people from an ethnic minority background has increased by almost 50% in the last 5 years. And let's just take a second to reflect on what that means. That means that a huge number of young kids from a BME background have been condemned to the unemployment scrap heap in a way that will impact on their lives forever. And I can say that because from my constituency, I still have people today who struggle to find work, struggle to stay in work, because they found themselves long-term unemployed as a result of the 1980s recessions. So when you are long-term unemployed, it doesn't just have an impact for you in the few years that a recession is around and the economy is struggling to grow, but actually it has an impact on you for the rest of your life. So we already know that 50% of young BME kids who've been long-term unemployed will pay that price for long-term unemployment for the rest of their lives. And that will impact on what they can do for themselves, but also what they can do for their families in the future. If you're under 25 and you're black, you're twice as likely to be out of work. So automatically, you are again condemned to struggle and suffer in an insecure position in a way that makes it a real struggle for you to meet the basic necessities of your life, putting a roof over your head and putting food on the table. We're not even talking about trying to break through in the major professions and rise as a future judge or a future prime minister even. We're just talking about the basic necessities of life and the fact that so many kids from a BME background are already locked out of being able to do that in a way that other people can more easily. And we also know that BME communities are still overrepresented in minimum wage jobs and are more likely to earn less than the living wage. Now, the minimum wage is a fantastic Labour achievement, but we know that if you are struggling on a minimum wage job, you will still struggle to meet, again, as I say, the basic necessities of your life. That is why we want to incentivise, if we're in government, the paying of the living wage, because at least that enables people to be able to meet their basic costs of living and to be a bit more comfortable. Half of the Bangladeshi community earn less than the living wage. Just gives you an idea of how much people are struggling and how much BME communities have struggled over the past 5 years. And in a way, that struggle is intimately connected to our stories of how we came to be in this country in the first place. Many people here around the room, I can tell, will trace their roots back to the Caribbean, to Africa, or the Indian subcontinent, and the groups of people that came to this country in the 50s and the 60s onwards. My granddad came to this country in the 1960s with my dad, and he did so for work. He gave up beautiful weather and a piece of land back in Pakistan in order to trade in for a terraced house where he slept on the floor with 10 of his relatives, working a poorly paid job in a factory, shivering in the cold and wondering what on earth all this rain was all about. But he did that because he wanted a better future, better economic prosperity for his children, more likely and more in his mind, his grandchildren. And that is the journey that all of our families have made. And that is why work and the economy are so intimately connected to our stories of how we came to be British citizens. And that's why it's so depressing to find that after all of those changes and sacrifices made by our grandparents and our parents' generation, actually our generation, second and third generation BME communities in this country are still struggling with the basics of meeting their cost of living. And that is why front and centre of Labour's manifesto, but also front and centre of our manifesto for BAME communities is the economy, because it all comes down and it all comes back to that fundamental ability to get a good job. And that is why our policies on our compulsory jobs guarantee, which will help so many thousands of young BME kids get off that unemployment scrap heap and get onto the employment ladder, and also our policies around the national minimum wage are so very important, because that is how we start to not only rebuild our economy and make sure it works for working people in a way that helps us also to get the deficit down, but it also helps us as individuals, as second and third generation immigrants proud to be British, honour the sacrifices made by our forefathers as well. And so that's why I'm so proud to be able to stand before this manifesto today. And I'm also incredibly proud to be introducing our next speaker this afternoon. He has had the label Rising Star, I think, attributed to him long before he even became an MP, but he has been doing a fantastic job since he was elected in 2010. He is, I think, one of the first members of Parliament of African origin. He has had a meteoric rise onto the Labour front bench, and a couple of years ago he was appointed as our shadow business secretary, and he has been taking Labour's case to the business community in a very forceful and strong way. And I was privileged to be able to work with him as my boss when I was a member of his shadow biz team. So please give a very, very warm welcome for the fantastic Chuka Umuna.
Well, good afternoon, and it's an honour and privilege to be in Keith Vaz's manor. And in particular, to be here with at least two of the trailblazers. It's good to see Paul Boateng to my left, politically too, here also, and great to follow Shabana. There's a bit of a discussion going on but great to follow Shabana, one of the first Muslim women MPs in the House of Commons as well. And I'm not going to talk for very long, but I just want to say something about why I'm Labour before just saying something about what we're going to do if I have the privilege of being appointed by Prime Minister Miliband as Business Secretary in the next Labour government. We talk a lot in politics about the how and the what, but I don't think we talk enough about the why. And my father was an entrepreneur, a businessman. He arrived in this country with very little indeed in the mid-1960s from Nigeria. And in many respects, his story is one which some might say dictated that during the 80s he should have been supporting Conservative Margaret Thatcher. But my dad, in spite of the fact that he was, did very well for himself and became a very successful entrepreneur, always supported this Labour Party. Always supported this Labour Party. And the reason that he did is because this party was the party that gave him a fair chance to get on in life in this country. And we can all remember the signs. No dogs, no Irish, no blacks. And it was because of the equalities legislation that we introduced in the 1960s and 70s that those signs were torn down. So there was a reason that my father was both a member of the Institute of Directors in the 80s, but also worshipped Harold Wilson. And I can tell you that is a very unusual combination indeed. But it goes really to the heart of why we joined the Labour Party, because ultimately the reason that beyond our party giving him a chance, my family is a Labour family, is because we believe in more than a me, myself and I politics, which says it's every man in it for himself and will leave people to struggle on alone. Because ultimately we recognise that for people to achieve their aspirations and dreams, we need a strong community and a strong society empowering them to make it. And it's not just an individual endeavour, but it is a national endeavour too, because we know in this era we're facing more international competition than ever before. We are a country of 65 million, competing with the likes of China with its 1.3 billion people. And that's why when we see people in our country trying to set up and divide communities against each other, scaremongering in the face of these challenges, we say no, that is not the way we are going to succeed and get on. And you know what? We've seen people do that to different groups in the past. We saw how people blamed black and Asian people in this country from the 60s and 70s when our parents all arrived for all of the country's problems, and we now see people doing exactly the same thing to Eastern Europeans, and this party won't have any truck with that whatsoever. Because we know we have big challenges as a country to ensure that everybody can get on, and we can only meet those challenges by working together. Now, the biggest challenge we face as a party politically is in illustrating that, frankly, we're not all the same. And if you look at our policy agenda, Ed talked about, right from the beginning of his leadership, restoring the promise of Britain, ensuring that the next generation do better than the last. And you see in our manifesto that we published yesterday, you see in the manifesto Sadiq was talking about us publishing today, our BAME manifesto, a whole swathe of policy which no other party is committed to implementing. So if our young people want to go to university, we're saying we're going to lift the lorry load of debt that you have had placed on your shoulders by this government, and we're going to reduce your tuition fees from £9,000 to £6,000 a year from September next year. If you want to go and do an apprenticeship and you get the grades, we're going to guarantee you an apprenticeship, and we're going to stop the snobbery in this country that says an apprenticeship is not as valuable as a degree. No other party is going to do that. And when you get into work, we think you deserve to earn a wage that you can live off, which is why we're going to get the national minimum wage up beyond £8 in the next Parliament, disproportionately helping BAME communities. And we also say that if you work, you deserve a level of security, and that is why we're going to abolish exploitative 0 hours contracts. Now, I've just given you 4 different policies there, but what I can tell you is that in all those policies, you see in aggregate an offer that no other party is offering at this general election. So there is a choice. And I just want to finish by saying this. It isn't just policies that matter, it is leadership. And in our leader, we have a man of sincere convictions and beliefs who has in him an utter determination to make sure that every individual in this room, all of your families, get on and succeed. He understands and is determined that we have a politics that looks like modern Britain, which is why he appointed the first, in me, black member of the shadow cabinet, in Sadiq, a first black British Muslim, first Muslim member of a British shadow cabinet. But he understands ultimately representation is one thing, but policies that work for people are another. And he is the only prospect for Prime Minister right now in this general election who I think is going to make a real difference in this country. So look, there's the choice, and there is a choice at this general election. We don't take any community for granted. We don't believe that we are entitled to anybody's support. But we've got a very good record that I'm extremely proud of. And I know that we've got a very strong offer for the future, building on our history of delivering for all our wonderful, diverse communities in this country. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon we have had some wonderful speeches from Sadiq Khan, Seema Malhotra, Chuka Amuna and Shabana Mahmood. All of them will be part of the next Labour government. Shortly, we will hear from our guest of honour. I was born on the 4th of April 1997, just 3 weeks before the election of the last Labour government. In my short life, I've spent 4,700 days living under a Labour government and only 1,800 under the Conservatives. We have all been told that the upcoming election will be the most important of our generation. The 7th of May will be particularly special for my generation as the Twitter generation, as I am a first-time voter. Young people making this decision for the first time are not just voting for a party, for a member of parliament, or even for a prime minister. We are deciding upon our vision for the future of this country. Some people will think that I have no choice in my vote, as my parliamentary candidate happens to be my father. However, as any parent with teenagers knows, we can make up our own minds. Ed Miliband has made it very clear that he values the opinions of young people. He has also said on numerous occasions that when we speak, young people need to be listened to, and that our contribution is just as important as anyone else's. This is why, on the 7th of May 2015, I will be voting Labour. But we have discovered something far more remarkable. Leicester has an ethnic minority population of 55%. Mosques, temples, gurdwaras and churches stand side by side. In our diversity, the people of Leicester live together in peace and harmony. This is why we are the #1 destination for people, for businesses, and even for future prime ministers. I am pleased that today we can meet the man we are ready to trust with our futures. Yesterday in Salford, he launched a manifesto which will change the face of Britain forever, with equality of opportunity at its core. Only Ed could have launched this, and he did so with complete conviction. When I cast my first vote in 22 days, I want to do so for a leader who is decent, honourable, and brave. A man who stops wars and does not encourage them. A man who speaks truth to power. That man is with us today. Please join me in giving an ecstatic welcome to the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Ed Miliband.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, Anjali, friends, can I say that it is great to be here in Leicester. And let me first of all say, let's hear a huge tribute to Anjali for the brilliant speech that she did. Please put your hands together for Anjali, ladies and gentlemen. And let's also recognise the person she referred to, her father, Keith Vaz, because Keith is an incredible champion for Leicester. He's an incredible champion for the Labour Party. He's an incredible champion for black and minority ethnic people right across Britain. He is somebody who has broken down so many barriers in his life. Please put your hands together for the incredible, the extraordinary, the unique Keith Vaz. And I also want to recognise some other people that you've heard from today. I am proud to have Chukra Munna as our Shadow Business Secretary in our Shadow Cabinet. I'm proud to have Shabana Mahmood with us today. Let's hear it for Shabana Mahmood, please, ladies and gentlemen. For Seema Malhotra. Let me just say about him, yes, we can. Sadiq Khan, let's hear it, ladies and gentlemen. For Carlene Mahmood, who does so much for our party, let's hear it for Carlene Mahmood. For another of your local MPs, John Ashworth, ladies and gentlemen. For somebody else who broke down so many barriers. He was one of, I think they call them the famous four, Paul Boateng, ladies and gentlemen. And also I want to recognise somebody else, and I'm going to let you into a secret about him. He always hates it when I say this. My mother used to do his babysitting, and not many people I can say that about. Willie Bark, Lord Bark, our Shadow Attorney General. It's almost like being at the Oscars. The Vazes, I think we should call them. Look, I want to say that it is great to be here, and today is Vaisakhi, and I want to wish all of you who are celebrating a happy Vaisakhi, because it's a very, very important event. It's also Tamil New Year, and I want to send my best wishes, as I say, to all of you. Now, we're a few weeks away, 3.5 weeks away from an incredibly important election. Some of you may have heard there's an election on. And I want to talk to you today about that election and about the stakes in that election. You know, it is going to be a very close campaign. It's going to be an election that comes down to the wire. I believe that this election represents a choice of two different futures for our country. There's really two ways of thinking about how a country succeeds. There's one view that says, as long as you take care of the richest and most powerful, the wealth will magically trickle down to everybody else. That experiment's been tried over the last 5 years, and it's failed. 5 years of wages falling behind bills, 5 years of the NHS going backwards, 5 years of so many young people fearing they're going to have a worse life than their parents. I take a different view about the way a country succeeds. And I think it speaks to the black and minority ethnic people of our country, which is that everyone is a wealth creator in our country. The wealth flows not from the top down, but from the middle out. It flows from every working person in our country. And once we recognize that the wealth flows from every working person in our country, we take a totally different view about the kind of country we need to run. You've got to reward the hard work of every person in our country and raise the minimum wage. We can't have insecurity for any person in our country, which is why we will ban the exploitation of 0 hours contracts, because people need security, not insecurity at work. We need to make sure that we give opportunity for all our young people. We'll give high quality apprenticeships to all our young people who get the grades, and we'll do something else as well. You know, Nick Clegg and David Cameron want to defend miring our young people in £44,000 worth of debt. I say cut the tuition fee from £9,000 to £6,000 and give all our young people the future they deserve. And I say also to you, we judge our country. We judge our country not simply how it helps the strong, but how it helps the most vulnerable as well. And you know, I was at an event in Loughborough just earlier on today, and somebody asked me about the bedroom tax. And they said, are you going to get rid of the bedroom tax? My answer is yes. We're going to abolish the bedroom tax, which is a cruel tax hitting the disabled and vulnerable in our society. But you know, friends, as we think about how we build a country that works for working people again, I think we should think about how we use the talents of every working person and every person in our country. And that's what our BAME Manifesto today is all about. Because I think over the years we've made huge advances. We've worked together to break down barriers and open up society. And you know, I see that on the Labour benches in Parliament. More Labour MPs from BAME backgrounds than all the other political parties combined. 52 BAME candidates standing for Labour for Parliament in this election. Now, we have achieved this together. We've achieved it because of the people who broke through the glass ceilings. People like Keith Vaz and Paul Boateng. Because they said enough is enough. But I do want to say this to you today. I'm not here to dwell on all of our achievements. I'm here to talk about the work that is not yet done. Because the reality is that we have passed laws on discrimination on the grounds of race and religion. We've put equality at the heart of how we govern with the Human Rights Act and the Equality Act. But the work is not yet done. That is my most important message to you today. I joined the Labour Party because of my belief in equality. That is what drives me on as a person. And why do I believe in equality? Because it's right in principle and it's the way we succeed as a country. But we're a long way from the equality we need as a country. And that work, I promise you today, I pledge to you today, will be at the heart of the next Labour government that I lead. Now let's talk, friends, about what we need to do. I think there are so many things where we need to make a difference, because we still live in a country where too many people from black and minority ethnic backgrounds are finding that life is incredibly tough for them. I'll just give you one example. The number of black, Asian and minority ethnic young people who've been out of work for more than a year has actually risen by nearly 50%. That is what is happening. Too many people from ethnic minority backgrounds are being held back by discrimination and disadvantage, more likely to be unemployed, more likely to be in minimum wage jobs, more likely to be in insecure work. And that is what our plan addresses. It's turning that round that is central to what we want to do. I've talked to you today about some of the changes that we will make in our economy, but we're going to do something else. We're going to look at every aspect of the way government works. We're going to have a race equality strategy for every part of the way government works. And we're going to look at those barriers and we're going to break them down. We're going to break down the barriers to good quality work. We're going to break down the barriers that exist in education for some of our young people who don't get the start they need in life. Every area of government we will look through and go through and say, what is the answer to build the truly equal society that we all believe in? That is what the next Labour government will do. And it's not just in our economy that that we need to do this. A Labour government will make diversity central to an effective modern criminal justice system that holds the trust of the whole country. That means working with the police to improve ethnic minority recruitment. It means working with the judiciary to do something that has not yet been done, which is make the next generation of judges and magistrates truly representative of our society as a whole. It means dealing with a Britain where ethnic minority people are more likely to be stopped and searched, more likely to die in police custody. So we will create a new police standards authority to strengthen the system of investigation and inspection. And we will reform stop and search powers to make it illegal to stop someone on the basis of the colour of their skin. And there's something else too, friends. We know that it's wrong for anyone of any background, of any faith, to be persecuted or discriminated against in the way that people are. So we need to confront the scourge of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia head on, with strong action on hate crimes. For the first time ever, saying that we're going to make sure that when people commit hate crimes, they're clearly marked on the criminal records of those who commit them, and tough new sentencing guidelines which ensure aggravated criminal offences based on hate crimes are properly dealt with by the courts, because that is the way we confront hate crime head on. We need also a review of police and CPS guidance to tackle anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, extra support in our schools for stopping discrimination, and as I say, driving race equality in every part of government. Let me say this also, because this is also part of what we need to do. It should be true of our policy at home and true of our policy internationally as well. Because this government, the next Labour government, will always stand up for the principles we believe in, principles of human rights, principles of equality, all round the world. And that is my commitment to you. Let me just say one other thing. This is an important election. This is a close election. You've seen elections many times here in Leicester that you've all been part of in this room. But this election is going to be one of the closest. And look, I know how committed you are to our party. I know how committed you are to a country that works for every person in Britain. But here's the thing. This election is too important to be left up to politicians. This election is about you. Because this election could come down to a few hundred votes in a few dozen constituencies. Now, the great thing about that is it means you can make the difference. So here's my suggestion to you. If you've got any DIY that needs doing between now and May the 7th, I suggest you put it off till after May the 7th. If you have any family weddings coming up, I suggest you try and put those off as well. Birthday parties, the same. You can celebrate them on May the 8th. In all seriousness, this is an incredibly important election. You know how high the stakes are for your community. You know how high the stakes are for Leicester. Look, the Conservative Party, they have their money, right? And they're going to buy the poster sites, and they've got all of those things. But here's the thing about the Conservative Party. They don't have people who will knock on doors for them. Now, I'm not surprised, because I wouldn't want to knock on doors for the Conservative Party either. But the difference with us is that we have people. We have people. And then think about this, and think about change. Think about the two people we have here with us today, Paul and Keith. Why did change happen? Why did Paul and Keith break through those glass ceilings? It wasn't because nice politicians came along and said, we're going to break through them for you. It wasn't because the old establishment had said, yeah, we'll deal with these things. It's because Paul and Keith said, enough is enough. Paul and Keith said, we cannot go on with a Britain and a parliament that does not look like the country that we seek to serve. They said, we're not going to wait for the battle for racial equality. We're going to fight for it ourselves. We're going to fight for it. And that is the way, friends, that political change has always happened. Workers' rights, a national health service, the racial equality laws that we have put in place, the future progress we're going to make. Of course, my role in doing it, the role of shadow cabinet, of cabinet members, of ministers is incredibly important. But it is the movement that makes the change. And that is more true in the next 3.5 weeks than it's ever been true. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for welcoming me to Leicester. It is brilliant to be here. But what is even more brilliant is the work you're going to do over the next 3.5 weeks. We know how high the stakes are at this election. We know how high the stakes are for our country. Let's go out and re-elect your Leicester MPs, and let's win this general election and change this country so we create the more equal, the more fair, the more just country we all believe in. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.